Hello, we're chipping away at the Arturia ARP2600V synthesizer, trying to learn each of its modules in turn, and today we're talking about the tracking generator. Now you might not even be able to see it in some instances, it's hidden behind this little control panel, so just click that little button. What the tracking controller is, tracking generator sorry, is really 4 controls in one, and they are completely independent. Each of these inputs maps to an output, and we'll just deal with input 1 for the time being. So basically we have this interface and we have 4 separate graphs that we can draw with our drawing tools. So for the time being, I just selected the eraser then to delete it. Just go to, so we cleaned everything down. We have a completely empty tracking generator, and I've set up a very simple sound from VCO2 generating more or less square wave. Okay, really simple. So the way I'm going to show you how the tracking generator works is to first of all draw something, and you saw what I was going to draw just earlier, a really simple line. And what that's going to do is that over a period of time specified by us, it's going to have a control voltage effect on something else in the synth. And it sounds very vague, but that's the whole nature of modular synthesis. So what we're going to have an effect on is the pitch of VCO2. And this is a really important thing to note about the tracking generator. You don't need an input. The graph itself, this shape that we draw, is perfectly capable of having a modulation effect all on its own. So at the moment we're just dealing with outputs. We're going to take an output from it, and we're going to go into one of our spare FM controls on VCO2. So now this slider here is going to allow us to affect the pitch of the VCO2 according to this tracking generator. Now, because the slider's turned all the way down at the moment, it's going to have no effect. Okay. Now let's turn the slider up a little bit, see what happens. Why do we have a static tone? Because the tracking generator hasn't yet been told how long to spend on its cycle. This, from the left hand side of the screen to the right hand side of the screen, is 1 cycle, and this frequency knob here is currently set to 0 Hz, which means it's stuck at the beginning of its cycle and it's generating a control voltage which is having an effect on the pitch by this much. If I turn this slider up, the pitch is going to go up. Okay. So we want this effect to apply over certainly the whole of the graph, but over a specified period of time. So if we set our frequency to 0.1 Hz, that means over the course of 10 seconds it's going to complete 1 cycle, and you can see it drawing its little comet line on the graph. It's going to take 10 seconds to get from the left hand side to the right hand side. Now let's play a note. Here it comes. When it gets to the right hand side of the screen, it's going to start again. There we go. So it's applying this graph to the modulation source that it's plugged into. At this moment it happens to be the pitch frequency modulation of VCO2, and it's taking this long to complete its cycle. If we speed it up, it's going to get faster. And obviously we can draw any shape we want. So you can hear it actually tracking this graph. Let's go back to the line. Okay. Then we get a second layer of modulation that we can apply to this effect, and this is achieved via our input socket. So the way I'm going to show you this is by taking I'm going to turn VCO1 into a low frequency oscillator, and I'm going to take a ramp wave, an inverse saw, out of VCO1. Just before we plug this in, I'm going to slow this right down. So I'm going to make it take 10 seconds again. So just to recap, the tracking generator is generating a downward frequency modulation. Okay, then we're taking our inverse saw out of VCO1, plug it into the input, and we've set it to anywhere 3-4 hertz is fine. Okay, right, so it's really difficult to wrap your head around. We've got a downward curve from the tracking generator and an upward curve from the VCO1. The VCO1 is trying to draw upward stroking sawtooth waves, and it's fighting this ever descending scale. So you're going to get a little bit of up and then a down, and then a little bit of up and then a down. So if I set this to 1 hertz, you can hear the upwards ramp lasting for a second, and then when that falls off its cliff, when it catches back up again, it's lower than it previously was, until the tracking generator gets to the end of its cycle. It wraps back around again, goes up to the top of its curve, and we start drawing diagonal lines on the descending curve as we travel. Let's try another example. Examples are definitely the way to go with this thing. Take the input source away. So now we're going to draw our own pitch and sine wave. There we go, a really basic sine wave. Hear this little spike? Because I missed a bit at the start of the curve. I'll leave it in, it's cute. Now then, we're going to take a square output from VCO1, still in low frequency mode, plug that into our input. So a square wave is basically, treat it like an on-off or a maximum minimum if you like. So now we're going to get the VCO1 trying to do something very extreme high, very extreme low, very extreme high, very extreme low against the sine wave that's oscillating in the background. So it's toggling up and down as it's travelling along the sine wave. Then we have the smooth control, which does exactly what it says. It makes all of the changes of modulation applied by the tracking generator smoother. So if we speed this square up and increase the smooth factor, the togglings are now kind of a portamento kind of thing. Until eventually it's really smoothing out the effect. Okay, so that's basically all that you've got with the tracking generator. When I say all, and you've got 4 independent ones of these. So when we go in, each one of these is a separate graph that you can draw whatever you want on, and they don't interact with each other. So that's an example of applying the change to pitch, but let's switch over now to controlling tone. So if we move our output control into the VCF, let's turn this down so that the ADSL is not having an effect on the pitch. So just unplug everything. Okay, nice simple tone again. Go back into our graph. Let's draw the original shape we had. Okay, have a greater effect on that channel. Increase the frequency. You can see as it's tracking the filter being applied in the background. Now let's apply a sawtooth modulation to this effect. Ramp, 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 ramp. And finally, let's get creative with our controls. So that's just a really simple switch to permanent hardwired VCF mode, so I've got my hands free. And I'll show you some of the drawing tools now. So every time I click and drag, it's going to draw a straight line in between those 2 points. This is going to draw a curve. Every time I let go and start drawing again, it's going to draw a new curve. So if I'm below the line, see how it changes when I go above or below the line as to how it draws its curve. We can apply noise. So if I'm dragging left and right to decide which part of the wave I'm going to affect, and up and down to determine how much noise I apply to the modulation in that zone. I can draw sine waves. Again, up and down to determine the amplitude of the wave. Left and right to determine the frequency. And I can draw square waves as well. Pretty cool. Mess around with the frequency. Mess around with the modulation source from the sawtooth that's being applied to this tracking generator graph. And we have general madness ensuing. So a really, really funky tool. I'll try to find a couple of presets when we go into our preset deep dives. I'll try to find at least one that makes really good use of the tracking generator. But yeah, how can you not make use of a freeform tool that's this flexible? It's really powerful and really interesting. You get some great effects out of it. That's that for this one. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.